Good evening and welcome to the October 11th, 2021 Kent County Public Schools Board of Education open session meeting. The first item on the agenda for this evening is to approve the agenda as presented. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I move that we approve the agenda.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and the agenda is approved as presented. The next item on the agenda is to move to closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members, this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hushin, supervisor of human resources, and Gail Manley, executive assistant to the superintendent, will move to closed session under General Provisions Article 3-305B to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, as well as any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals, as well as to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to those negotiations. Do we have a motion to move to closed session?
So moved.
We have a motion by Dr. Costa. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. We will now move into closed session and return Good evening. We'd like to reopen the October 11th, 2021 Kent County Public Schools Board of Education open session meeting. The first item on the agenda after the closed session is to report on closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members, this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hushin, Supervisor of Human Resources, and Gail Manley, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent, met in closed session under General Provisions Article 3-305B, Section 1, to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, as well as any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. Section 9, to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to negotiations. This session was for information and discussion purposes only. No action was taken. Personnel actions will be voted upon by this board at the end of the superintendent's report. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Buckle, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to ask the audience and the board members to please remain standing. I know this is normally out of sync for us, but I just would like to let us observe a moment of silence in remembrance of Madison Unikis and her family as they go through this difficult time. Send positive thoughts and keep them in your hearts. Thank you, everyone. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the September 13th, 2021 open session meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from that meeting?
I move that we approve the minutes from the September 13th, 2021 open session meeting.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. McGee. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. The minutes are approved as presented. The next portion of the agenda for this evening is the superintendent's report. Dr. Couch?
Okay, thank you, President Getz, members of the board. I have a few items to report. The KCMS Educational Specifications Committee will be entertaining their second meeting, which is scheduled for October the 14th. I know that was the same date as the homecoming, but we should be done by 6 o'clock. So the meeting would go from 4:30 until 6 o'clock. Kent County Middle School Trojan Influence has already begun. They've started their after-school program, and they are working with the students on strategies for deterring bullying, and they're also doing some really interesting math challenges. The early fall MCAP testing is winding down. We're doing makeups right now, and I know there was some concern or some information out there whether this was just a Kent County decision to do the early fall testing. It is mandatory from MSDE. This is something that we have to do. So we should be finished up with the testing within the next week or so. Bayside Athletics, I wanted to just briefly spend a few minutes talking about that. Bayside Athletic Conference released a press release today about some changes, some new safety protocols that will be in place for winter 2021 sports season to promote safe participation of students, coaches, officials, and spectators. The Bayside Conference has announced a new set of protocols for the upcoming winter 2021 high school sports season. The following safety protocols will go into effect at the onset of the winter high school sports season. There will be surveillance testing Unvaccinated students must be tested for COVID-19 at a minimum of once every 14 days. Vaccinated students are encouraged but not required to participate in the above testing program. However, if there is a positive case of COVID-19 within the student's cohort, he must be tested for COVID-19. Student athletes who miss a scheduled test for COVID-19 are ineligible to participate in practices or competition until the COVID-19 test has been taken and negative test results are provided to the student's school. And student athletes who test positive for COVID-19 are ineligible to participate in practices or competition until the student completes the exclusion quarantine requirements set forth by the local school system. We are working right now with a vendor that will be coming to the practices to administer the testing so that it's convenient for our student athletes. So we're working with Mako, is the laboratory that's working with us at this point in time. So we should have more information that I can share, hopefully at the next work session. Kent County High School track is not completed, but the students can obviously have their game and be on the track. There is some concern, the striper was there to complete that work, and there was some concern about the measurements, and so they're sending another striper, and the vendor is coming back to take a look at it. They think that the original gentleman that was there miscalculated his measurements, so we shall just see how that transpires. Central office parking lot will be paved this Thursday and Friday, so it'll be difficult for the staff to be in the building because all of the entrances you have to go through the parking lot. So staff will be working remote and administrators will be working out in the schools. National players will present a Raisin in the Sun at Kent County High School on Thursday, October the 21st, and present 2 theater workshops on October the 22nd at Kent County Middle School. And then before I do my last, have my last report, I wanted to talk to the board about scheduling a work session on the 25th of October so we could talk about data that we're getting from some of our testing. So if you would please check and see if that works with you, I'd like to go ahead and schedule that for 5:30.
That works for me.
Okay. And then the last item is about the high school. I know that there have been a number of concerns about the high school due to student behavior, and I was prepared to share with you all the steps that have been taken by the administration and the staff to address these concerns. However, I think it's best for the board and the community to hear from the staff and the administration in terms of what they are implementing and how they are implementing these strategies. So I'd like to ask for board indulgence as I turn it over to the high school and let them talk about some of the strategies that are in place already at the high school.
Good evening. As the faculty and staff of the high school, we're well aware of what's been happening in the building and what's been on social media, and we thought it was important for us to address what we're doing to try and fix issues that we're having at the high school, and also to ask for some community and parent help and explain how we think that can happen. So I am going to turn this over first to Mr. King and Mrs. Knabb, who are going to talk about some of the policies that we've implemented thus far.
Hi. We do have, as probably all of you know, we do have a faculty advisory committee, and the staff does bring concerns to, I believe it's 5 members of our staff. And at the first meeting, some of the issues and concerns that we had, were addressed. And as a result, one of the things that we have implemented starting actually Friday, was we all have staff duties. So, for example, we do have teachers placed outside of restrooms, and we have 30-minute increments. So we spend 30 minutes of our planning out there, and it's, you know, it rotates. And we do have staff members patrolling the parking lots, as well as lunch shifts. We have additional members, I think it's 2 to 4 people in the cafeteria to offer some support there. So we do believe that the presence does, you know, make a difference. I had a student come up to me on Friday. Actually, she came and made up a quiz during our lunch, and you know, she just out of the blue said, you know, I feel so much better today. I feel like, you know, just people being in the hallway does make an improvement. So I did want to share that.
Another thing that's happened at the high school is we had been using a QR code for a pass system to allow more flexibility for students to come in and out of the classroom when they're going to and from the bathroom or the nurse or anything like that. And we've kind of gone back to an actual physical hall pass in order to kind of maintain a more clear hallway, so that when you're in the hallway and you can actually see a pass with a student, so that you can get them back to class if they've been out too long, because an actual time stamp with a student is a lot quicker to access than a time stamp on a computer. So that's just another way that we're trying to keep the hallways clear in order to keep students in the classrooms as opposed to wandering the halls.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about was the communication at the high school. I think that our administration does a really great job at working with us, the staff, and relaying information back and forth. Ms. Nab mentioned about our faculty advisory committee, where we can come and address concerns with them. But one thing that, you know, Mr. Graff, Mrs. Wharton, and Mr. Pretlow do a really good job of is just being open. You know, I know I can go into Mr. Pretlow's office at any time of the day, if he's even in his office during the day, because he's usually always in the hallway. But I know I can go find him or any of the other two and just sit down and address any concerns that we do have. And they really do remind us and really kind of focus on that open door policy with us, the staff, and as the students as well. So.
So I particularly wanted to address some of the ways that community members or adults in our students' lives could help us in this situation. We know that after 20 months of not being consistently in the building, I think I was actually talking to President Getz and Ms. Sullivan in the hallway today, that our seniors are the last class that had a full school year in our building. And so this has definitely been a shock for some of them that have never spent this amount of time in our building. And so a few things that we could ask of adults and community members are talk to your students at home about what's going on social media. Check their social media, because that's where a lot of our issues are stemming from, are conversations happening where we can't see them. Talk to them about being open with adults in the building if they know something is going to happen. Mr. Shaw couldn't be here this evening, but he brought up that when we did have an altercation in the hallway on Friday, a student came into his classroom and said, "Mr. Shaw, they're fighting out there," so that he was able to get out there and help take care of the situation. And he emailed that student's parents and said, "Thank you so much," because there were a group of kids with phones and cameras out who never alerted an adult. And it's a hallway with lockers slamming at the end of the day, and it's loud anyway. And that student notifying him allowed him to get to where he needed to be to help. And so talk to your students at home about what should you do when something like that happens, rather than pulling out your smartphone and hitting record. And then finally, if you know that your student is in crisis, please let us know at the school. What are some of the signs that we can look for when your student is in crisis? Because if we don't know in the morning that that student might need help throughout the day, and then there's some sort of conflict when we walk into a bathroom and say, "Hey, you've been in here for a while, we need you to go to class," sometimes just that conversation can go the wrong way because we're unaware that they're in crisis. So please, if you can communicate to us, call the front office. It's had the same phone number since 1972. Call guidance. Let us know what we can do to help your student, because every adult in our building wants to help them.
I'm just going to reiterate a little bit about what Ms. Bachman just said, but specifically social media, definitely. If you see something, you hear something, please let us know, say something. We've had families who have called us in the morning and said, hey, there was an issue at the bus stop today. I just want to put a little ear out there and let you guys know that we heard something may happen today. Or we've had a couple of children within the last couple of weeks who've come up to us who are comfortable enough to say, I heard such and such, make a threat, those types of things. And I think letting the children know that it's okay to advocate for your peers is a big thing, especially with not wanting to tell on each other and, not wanting to have that stigma across them. But I think having that support at home too will help to know that it's okay to advocate for your peers and for their safety. Behavior during a fight, like Ms. Bachman said as well, talking to them about those cell phones. Cell phones are a big issue, having them out in class, even with communication with parents. I see at the front office, I get a lot of phone calls from parents that say, oh, my daughter called me from class, or my daughter texted me. I think, making them aware that, first of all, we shouldn't have our phones out in class, but that they should contact the correct person, contact an admin, ask your teacher to speak with someone, those types of things, rather than contacting home first and then having them contact me and then trying to find that student. Those are some of the things that definitely would help support us in reinforcing what we are trying to do at the school as well. Something as simple as dress code as well. Those are some of the things that admins spend a lot of time taking care of, trying to find a shirt for someone who's inappropriately dressed. Those types of things can really start at home, and we really would, appreciate and love to have the support of the community and families as we try to de-escalate some of those things.
Good evening. Today we had a class meeting for each individual class, starting with the freshman class and working up to the seniors during the first 2 periods of the day today. Some of the topics, basically we wanted to reestablish the tone, the culture of the school. We did directly address some of the inappropriate behaviors that were taking place over the past two or 3 weeks with the physical altercations, the tardiness and lateness to class in the mornings in particular, and following the lunches. Again, we went back to the physical passes so that a student who's legitimately in the hallway, leave class to go to the restroom or the nurse or the front office, isn't asked 4 or 5 times where you're going, because nobody knows if that person is legitimately in the hall or cutting class. So now with the physical passes, it reduces some of the face-to-face conflicts, because some of the students really believe it's a conflict when they're asked where they're going. So now they can just simply show it and continue to move. It's less stressful for the staff as well. The dress code was addressed a little while ago. And just I would say I guess the only way I can say it is the adjustment period. It's over, the honeymoon's over. The students have to really, really get used to the day-to-day operations of being back in school, because for some of them, they haven't been in school for 16, 18 months. So that adjustment period for the month of September was difficult for them. It wasn't as easy on the staff as it should have been as well, because again, doing it virtually or hybrid with not having an entire school of students is a big adjustment for us as well. So those things were addressed this morning. I think they were received well by all the students that came in those different class meetings. So the rest of the day seemed to go a little smoother. The lunches and things of that nature, with some of the changes that we've implemented, are definitely going to make the day-to-day operations a lot smoother.
So I would just like to, I think, wrap things up by saying that we knew we were going to have some heavy lifting to do this school year, especially based on the challenges and the completely different situation that we had last school year. But now that we actually have been living and breathing it every day, it was different challenges that we anticipated. But we have a lot of pride in the blue and gold. We still think it's always a good day to be a Trojan, and it's always a good day to wear the blue and gold. And I think that we are making the changes and taking the steps that we need to move in that direction.
Taking questions?
You can ask me. With that, Mr. Getz, I just wanted to add that we're deploying all the available resources from central office and student services as well to provide additional assistance in the school as needed. And I know that I spent my morning at the high school, and I know that Francois Sullivan and also President Getz, you were there during lunch. So, I think that a large presence in terms of making sure that, maybe we can see things that could be operating a little differently, and we certainly need to be aware of that and try to provide some input and assistance. But I think that, for the most part, we have really good kids at the high school, and I think that I think that a lot of the changes that we have put into place, they're just going to take some time, but I do believe that they're going to make a positive difference in the school. So that concludes my report.
Yeah, I would just like to add, just to make a comment. Being in the school today, visiting was a very different dynamic than in years past with, I'll just say pre-COVID, before things kind of fell off. But what I will say, it was every corner. It was pretty great to see staff and see folks interacting in the lunchroom as well. And I think Ms. Saunders mentioned, and she may have, so she's right there. The one thing that rings pretty heavy is the lift, right, and how heavy that lift is. So I'm just asking, that we continue to focus, because I don't want not only, this is just me speaking, we really, as you mentioned, we have to support that school every way possible. And that's from the students to support staff to teachers to admin, straight up and down the line. So, it's just a lot of activity today being there, walking the halls and kids actually in classrooms. It was actually relatively quiet from the educational space. I think Ms. Sullivan and I were kind of, it was good to see, kids actually learning. But anyway, it's a heavy lift. And so I think if we're nimble, and that's everyone, that I think that, we'll just continue to keep focusing on what has to be done or what the right thing is. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, just while we're on this topic, I don't understand, Dr. Couch, some of simple structural things that were not in place at the beginning of the year, such as duty coverage. That is, one of the bigger things that I was taught coming out of teacher preparation some 10 years ago. Simple things as a tardy policy, simple things as, while I understand everybody is doing their part, it just kind of upsets me just a little bit that some of these simple structural things were not in place.
Right.
And if they were, where were they?
Right. What I would say is with the block schedule, I think that there was probably some misconception in terms of whether that was dedicated to complete planning time, or if there was some time that could be adjusted for staff to be out in the hallway. I mean, that's 90 minutes in terms of a planning time. So I think that just getting the buy-in from the staff in terms of saying, okay, if we use 60 minutes of that time to plan, can we be out in the hallways the other portion of that? So that was that part. And as you heard some of the teachers talking about, they were using QR codes for the tardies, but that was not as effective. I think the reason why they were using QR codes in the first place was because of COVID and not touching the passes. But that is not as effective as actually having a pass in their hand and us being able, or them being able to physically ask students for their passes. So I think that was just a small structural change that was made, that was utilized last year effectively, but there was, significantly less students in the school last year. So, and I do think that, the students, we've had to make some tweaks in terms of what works and what doesn't work, and I think that happens in all schools. So that's what I would say there.
Dr. Couch, in my conversations with students more so than staff, the frustration has been that the kids that are behaving and abiding by the rules are then seeing that the kids who have not, there doesn't seem to be any accountability. And in those class meetings today, I wonder if it was made clear to every student that here's the line. When you step over it, there's a consequence, and I'm telling you ahead of time what your consequence is, because in the real world, there are consequences. So like I said, it's been very frustrating for kids. They know there are fights going on, and then they go to school the next day, and, I don't expect any of us to be privy to what the appropriate consequence was, but there needs to be consequences, and I think that should be spelled out. I mean, I definitely agree that we're in some really weird times, and the pandemic has affected social and emotional, but, rules haven't changed,
Right.
And enforcing them. I mean, it doesn't do any good to have a rule on the book if we're not going to back it up.
Right. And I agree with you. I think that, that there have been consequences that have been issued, and some of those consequences are going to make their way up to this level. And that is the way that we would typically follow the disciplinary consequence structure that is in place and has been adopted by the board.
Okay, I mean, I know we got to move forward, but there's a part of me that thinks that if we had sort of done this from the very beginning, we wouldn't have had this escalation. We wouldn't have reached the point that we reached last week where, is there anybody in Kent County that didn't know there wasn't a fight going on out there?
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely hear you, and I think you heard some of the staff saying that we knew it was going to be difficult. I don't think that in some respects we really grasped as difficult as it would be with the fact that many of these students haven't been in school for like when you only had 100 students in the school last year, to end the year, and then you've got 560 kids. It's a little bit overwhelming in terms of the needs of many of the students, but that's no excuse.
I was going to say there were 500 kids in the middle school last year, and they went all year.
Right. But that's right, but they were there all year too, and not all of the high school students were in place. So I hear what you're saying, and the only thing that I can say is that, everybody's committed to do what's necessary in order to turn things around and to get in front of this.
Thank you.
And perhaps one of the staff or teachers who spoke, the class meetings that you described, is that something that you do regularly, or that something that was unique to this Sure.
This will be the second set of class meetings that we've held.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda in the superintendent's report portion is the tenured teacher recognition. See Mr. Hushin coming to the podium.
Yes.
Thank you, President Getz, school board members, Dr. Couch. This report is for information only. We are here to honor those teachers who have earned tenure with the start of the 21-22 school year. After 3 years of satisfactory teaching and the evaluations in a career for a teacher, it marks as a milestone as they end their 3-year period of probation. I know we have some folks in attendance. I'm going to simply read through the list as we can honor them. I ask that we hold your applause until all the names are called, and then if we have time for a very quick photo, that would be great. Okay? First up, we have Miss Taylor Hudson. We have Tiffany Blake, Sarah Brock, Jillian Wharton, Janet McCormick, Kim Maney, Kaylee Cochran, Anna Farragher, Jason Schad, Dawn Riley, and Mr. Brian Williams. I see that Ms. Hudson is in attendance. If everyone can join me in giving all of our staff a round of applause. Here's your official certificate. Dr. Couch?
Okay. Would you like to come up too?
President Jess would like to run for a photo. Sorry to put the spotlight on Ms. Hudson.
I don't want to be in the background.
Up to you guys, all the masks. Congratulations, Ms. Hudson.
Okay, excuse me. The next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 21 audit financial statements. These statements will be presented by Ms. Aubrey McHenrick from TGM Group LLC.
Good evening.
Good
Thank
evening.
you for having me.
Thank you.
I think you all have a hard copy, and I think an electronic copy was submitted to you of the financial statements. Just wanted to kind of go through the highlights briefly with everyone and answer any questions that anyone might have. So the first report, the independent auditor's report, which is right after the table of contents, I think it begins on page 3. The independent auditor's report, if we turn to page 2 of that report, that's where our opinion is listed. And in our opinion, it was a clean audit report, unmodified. We found no issues during the course of our audit. So it was the best opinion that you can get for an audit. And just to briefly touch the second paragraph on that page, the paragraph under opinions on that page is emphasis of matter. So during fiscal year 21, GASB 84, which is the Government Accounting Standards Board, required us to look at any fiduciary activities in place and determine if we were reporting those correctly. It provided guidelines on how those should be reported. And when we look, so your fiduciary activities prior to this year included your retiree health plan contributions as well as your school activities funds. When we looked at the school activities funds, because the schools are essentially administered by a principal who is a member of the board, who is employed by the board, those were not deemed to be fiduciary activities anymore. So they're included actually in the government activities on the financial statements now. And that's just pointing that out. If we flip, the next report is the report on internal control, and just talks about how we look at internal control when we're just determining how we're going to do our audit, and that describes what that process. The next section is the management discussion and analysis, and this section is really the board's opportunity, the management, to put what's in the financial statements in a more easy to read format for readers who are looking just at who want the overall basics of the financials. So I am going to skip through that section to page, and if someone has questions on that, I'd be happy to answer it, but to the financial statement section, which starts on page 18. The first set of statements is the statement of net position, which is like balance sheet, and then the statement of activities, which is your income. And these financials are presented on a what I'd call a full GAAP basis. So this will show your capital assets, which is your buildings, the schools, that type of thing, and as well as your long-term liabilities. I think it will be more helpful if we switch to the governmental funds balance sheet, which is on page 20. This does not include the fixed assets and the long-term debt. So this is kind of what happened, not on a budgetary basis as the budget was presented, but on a GAAP basis. And if we just go through this, I looked at some of the numbers compared to last year. Cash this year is at about 5.9 million. Last year, it's about $2.2 million up from last year. So last year was about at 3.6, 3.7 million. And that's primarily you received some money in for school construction from the state. You have some revenue that's come in that you haven't had expenses to offset yet. And then there was a change in fund balance where revenues exceeded expense by almost $1 million when we get to the next statement. Other than that, if you go down to the fund balance section, you'll see non-spendable items are typically items like your inventory, things that can't be spent. Restricted items are food service fund money. But in here in committed, the 1.5 million, that is 500,000 that is set aside, I'll say, for contingencies. And then the other piece of that is what has been committed for next year's budget to balance next year's budget. And then in assigned, you'll see the under non-major governmental funds, that 172,000, 173,000, that's coming in now from your school activities. That was their revenue over the course of time, the revenue that's exceeded expense, and what that added when we included that this year. The next page is the expenditures, revenues and expenditures. This is on page 22. And again, your county appropriation between the capital projects and general fund was up almost $1 million this year. Restricted federal revenues and restricted state revenues were also both up this year. And expenditures were pretty much on par with the year before. There were increases in expenditures for capital outlay for the school construction projects that are going on. Any questions on any of that? No? I will skip through. The next section is your fiduciary activities, which is your retirement account and what you have invested for other post-employment benefits. The next section would be your notes to the financial statements that chart on page 26. We can flip through there. Honestly, most of that wording, other than to talk about the change that was made for the school activities, is pretty standard year to year. So if someone has questions, I'd be happy to answer. But otherwise, I will direct your attention to page 53, which is in the required supplementary information. And this is your schedule of revenues, expenditures, and encumbrances, budget and actual. So this is really what you've budgeted and how that looks budget to actual. And if we look at this, you'll see up under revenues, for the most part, other than the restricted federal and state, everything is fairly close to how it was budgeted. The restricted federal and state, when you get grant awards, that pushes the budget up, even though those funds have not yet been received. So they will award you, like a good example is funding for COVID, the ESSER funding. They'll award that, and that pushes that budget up. but you haven't yet gotten those funds or haven't expended those funds yet. So that's why you see a big difference there. And then under expenditures and encumbrances, you'll see in many of the categories you were actually below budget expenditure-wise. And that ended up leaving you with an excess of revenues over expenses of about 1.8 million for the year.
Is that money that would be in fund balance? Is that what I understand it? No?
I'm sorry.
Is that money that would be fund balance?
It would roll into fund balance, and then what happens with that funding is that then rolls into what you have to use for, and not for 22, but for 23, correct? We'll go into the 23 budget. That's correct. And actually, if you look, there is a fund balance footnote on page 49 that details out the specifics of what's making up your fund balance. But yes, that is rolling into fund balance.
Thank you.
Any other questions or? Well, I would just like to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to Dr. Couch, and thank you to Elisa Stewart, who helped me tremendously. We worked very closely together. I really appreciate all your help and that of your team as well. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is an action item. So the administration is recommending acceptance of the report presented. Do we have a motion to accept?
So moved.
We have a motion by Dr. Costa. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. McGee. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and the reports are accepted as presented. Thank you.
I would just like to take a moment to thank TGM Group for being so professional with regard to working with our staff. And then I also just want to make sure we send our thanks to Elisa Stewart and also her team, because it does take a lot to go through an audit and to get all of this in place for presentation to the board. So they've really done a great job, and I just want to acknowledge all of their hard work.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda in the superintendent's report is the Kent County Public Schools September 30th enrollment.
Good evening, President Getz, board members, Dr. Couch. I want to come to you tonight with our annual enrollment count and details. So just knowing, I mean, we are a county, this is not a shock, we are a county that has an enrollment that is declining. So we know when and I said this in September, we knew that rolling up numbers from September of 20 to September of 21, we were going to be down approximately 16, and you can see those numbers at the bottom. As of 9/30 last year, we had a count of 138 in the senior class, even though I will say there was 142 that graduated. Using the 9/30 count, there was 138. 122 kindergartners, and that's your difference. I'm actually going to skip this slide and come back to it. So just in terms of where our students may be, we knew that our pre-K numbers were down somewhat last year. Many of the parents chose to, either keep students home as pre-Kers or some other program, simply, worried about what their first experience in school might be like. So, but looking at those 83 pre-Kers from last year, 79 did return, and we did have 43 new kindergartners that did not attend Kent County Public Schools pre-K. And you can see at the bottom the difference of the 4 where they exited to. 1 local private and 3 exited to other public schools in Maryland. Just looking at very quickly, and I'm not going to read through these numbers, I'll just leave the slide up a little bit so you can see it. Over the summer months, we had about 166 students enrolling, and we had 121 exiting. You can see there again where they went. I can always back up if you want to see these again. In terms of homeless data, 2021, 30 families, and again, this number fluctuates throughout the school year. But currently, as of September 30, 43 students with a homeless status, and that accounts for 30 different families. In terms of out-of-zone requests, we did see a spike in out-of-zone requests. This is probably the highest that I've had in my 5 years in this position, 51 applications. Most were approved, one was denied. So I'm going to back up a little bit, and I realize this slide is very hard to see, but this gives you the details in terms of if you're looking at school by school, what your enrollment count ends up being. You can also see that we can look at elementary in terms of a plus or a minus. So overall, elementary is down 17, your middle school is up 13, your high school is down 20, and overall, you're looking at a deficit of 25 students in terms of what you're going to get funded for. You'll see that, wish I had a little pointer. You'll see that also in red near the bottom, there are a handful, 3 students that are non-public, and again, I'm just saying the funding formula gets a little bit tricky sometimes, but initially in this particular funding formula count, those students are not counted for enrollment. We have a few students right now that are not counted in the enrollment because of their immunization status. We did apply for the 45-day extension. We were approved that, so we feel fairly confident that we will retrieve those monies after November for that count. But you can see also included in the count is our Blended Learning Academy. There are 13 students enrolled as of the 30th. I worked with Tracy Galbranson this afternoon to make sure that what you're seeing here today are the numbers that we're actually going to be funded for. So sometimes enrollment count and what's funded is sometimes a little bit different. So, questions?
We were just some of us were just at a school board conference, and some school districts are down by hundreds of students, so this is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we are always hoping, I would love to see us in the plus. I know we all would. Yeah.
The increase at the middle school, is that just that the 6th grade class was bigger, or was that actually new people coming to the area? Or?
I think it's a combination. Honestly, Francois, I didn't look that up, but I can look it pretty quickly and let you know before the end of the meeting.
Oh, okay. It is a large 6th grade
class.
Okay.
But I know you also did some recruiting with your home school population and your private school population. So I know that just looking at the high school, minus 20, I know that last year's, as I said, we had 142 graduate, 123 in this year's 12th grade. So that's, what, 19?
Yeah.
Of your 20?
Ms. Williams, can you speak to the homeless canvassing? I mean, how does that process work in the county, and who's involved? And
what does that look like?
Yeah.
So, yes. So, in other words, when we have a student that, is enrolling for the first time, or, honestly, that's been here for years, and they find themselves in a situation where 99% of our homeless students are doubled up, which means they're not living in their own house. The family may be living with a grandparent, or the family may be living, with a family friend. In other words, it's not necessarily a permanent situation. That's kind of the key, is that it's not a permanent situation.
so to the best of your knowledge, I mean, speaking with some of the other school systems, I mean, there are actually students that are homeless, living behind schools and stuff like that. I mean, we're not in that we know of, to the best of your knowledge, that we don't have kids that are actually living in
Tents? Or something?
We have one
Living in a tent?
car,
Car.
Okay.
one family. I'll say it that way. We have one family.
Okay.
Everybody else is doubled up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just shocked to hear that it takes almost 7 or 8 county agencies and some other jurisdictions across the state where they go out and just canvass for 2 days straight, and they look everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's wild.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing about being small is we know the families. We're able to work with, either the local care team, the DSS, trying to, help get them some resources and get them back on their feet. So to be doubled up is in a much better situation than living in a tent or in a car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, this item was for information only. Is there any other questions or any comments?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the, in the superintendent's report portion of the evening is the board negotiating team.
Okay, President Getz, members of the board, you have before you a memo to approve the negotiating team for the board. Ed Silver will serve as chief negotiator. Adam Constas, Gina Giacomowitz, Daniel Hushin, Elisa Stewart, and Bryn Kibler will be on the negotiating team.
So this is an action item. The administration is recommending approval of the 2021-2022 Board of Education negotiations team. Do we have a motion to do so?
I have a question. Can I
Please.
ask a question before we
Sure.
get that far?
Yeah.
So, I know Mr. Silver is mentoring the high school principal, but he's not what I would consider a full-time employee. What qualifies him to be on the negotiating team?
We have brought outside negotiators to do this before, and they're paid
Okay.
by contract.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thanks.
And what qualifies him is he's been our chief negotiator for the last.
Well, that part, I mean, I knew he was qualified.
Yeah.
What I meant was, didn't know for sure that someone from the outside could be on the
Right.
team. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, the administration is recommending approval of the 2021-2022 Board of Education negotiations team. Do we have a motion to do so?
I move that we approve the 2021-2022 Board of Education negotiations team.
Mr. Johnson has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments or questions? Discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent's contract, FY22 through FY25. In accordance with Comar 4-201, term of the superintendent, Dr. Couch's reappointment was approved by the Board of Education on February 22nd, 2021. A letter was submitted as required in Comar to the state superintendent requesting approval of that appointment, and a subsequent letter of approval was received. The board then negotiated a contract with the superintendent in closed session. The Board of Education must formally adopt in open session the contract approved by the Board of Education in closed session. Do we have a motion to do so?
So moved.
We have a motion by Dr. Costa. Do we have a second?
A second?
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is personnel actions. Mr. Hushin?
Thank you again, President Gantz, school board members, Dr. Couch. Each month, the board receives a personnel action report that is discussed in closed session and then voted on during open session. The administration seeks approval of the stated personnel actions.
Okay, this is an action item, as Mr. Hushin just mentioned. The administration is recommending approval of the stated personnel actions. Do we have a motion to do so?
I move that we approve the stated personnel actions for the meeting today.
The motion has been made by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. McGee. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, the next portion of the meeting is public participation. Ms. Manley? As you're walking up, just comments regarding the rules for public participation. Speakers should limit their comments to 3 minutes. Comments about the actions or statements of individual staff members are not appropriate for public comments and should be referred to the superintendent of schools or processed through available channels. If submitting written testimony, speakers are requested to provide a copy to the president. Please remember that this is an opportunity for the community to address their comments to the board. It is not an opportunity for dialogue. If you have any questions that need an answer, please contact the superintendent or write a letter to the Board of Education, and a response will be sent back to you. Ms. Manley has the first card here, and the comments will be timed. There will be a timer that goes off when you hit your 3 minutes. Thank you. The person I have is Joanna Blackburn.
Hi. So I have an 11th grade student at Kent County High School. And so I'm really here because I wasn't going to say anything. But then when I heard what Trish McGee had to say, and I felt like clapping and cheering because she was 110% spot on as far as those children that are witnessing the other kids who are not getting disciplined, who are not having repercussions. Those kids are feeling really deflated. They are really wondering why. And so it's really heartbreaking to watch. I've witnessed a fight outside the school as I'm picking up my child, and her response was like, yeah, public school. That was her response. And I thought, God, I mean, I have 2 other kids who graduated in 2016 and 2018. They never spoke of the fights that are happening now. And I agree with Trish. This needed to be thought of right from the get-go, right in August, way before August. This is going to be an unprecedented year, and we really need to think about it. Fights that she's witnessed, 200-pound boy pushing, I think, either a teacher or administrator against a wall. And when she told me, I said, oh, he's gone, he's suspended. No, Mom, he was in the afternoon cutting up in the hallway with a friend. And I'm like, what? It's maddening. There's no discipline. It's heartbreaking. And then she texted me today and said, homecoming, I'm sure it's a rumor, might be canceled. Wow. So you're going to discipline all the good kids who are looking forward to something because the other kids, because of all the fighting, that there's going to be a cancellation of homecoming or powder puff. So I want to remind you, when the discipline doesn't happen to the kids who are not following the rules, you have a lot of smart kids who are watching and listening, and it is really affecting them too. That's it.
Ms. Manley? Thank you. Julie Dunlap?
Hi, so we've all gotten to know each other recently. I'm Julie Dunlap. I have a son, Aiden, who is a 10th grader at the high school. And I really, really want to believe that this is going to get better. I really want my kid to stay at Kent County. I really want this to be a place that he loves. And it's hard to do that. And I appreciate the teachers who are here tonight talking about what's happening at the high school and what you're doing to make it better. I really want to stress, how can we increase communication between the high school and home? You know, I've tried to be an involved parent. I talk to my kid every night about what's happening. I've made parent-teacher conferences coming up. I'm an active parent. I've heard from the school once in a voicemail that didn't even identify who the caller was. They just started talking. You know, that is the only communication as a parent that I have received. And so it is really hard to involve parents and to get parents on board with helping their kids and talking to their kids about stuff when we don't even know what's happening. And I really think that our school can be successful. You know, there's a group of parents who really want to be involved. The PTSA really wants to be involved in helping to make the school a better place. But we're struggling to get information. We're struggling as a PTSA to get information and to have communication about things, you know, and it's a two-way street. So I really just want to stress, there are a lot of us who really want to be involved, and, you know, I hope that we can get more communication to really open it up for our kids, because the goal is for them to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Manley, was that? Okay. The next portion of the, please. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Commissioner wants to say something.
Oh, you want to say something?
The commissioner wants to say.
Oh, did you want to say something?
Would it be appropriate now, or is there a better time?
No, absolutely.
Right now, Mr.
Come on.
Sorry.
I didn't see. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
That's okay. President Getz and Dr. Couch and board members, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. But unfortunately, we're all facing a serious problem here with our schools. As you well know, all these reports that are of discipline problems in the school has made its way to the commissioners. I've been notified by the law enforcement. I've been contacted by teachers. I've been contacted by parents, and I've talked to students about what's going on at the high school, and it's not a very good picture. I mean, the fights get all of the. I've been sent videos of the students and the resource officers rolling around on the floor. Reports of sinks being ripped off the walls in the bathrooms. Toilets intentionally clogged up so that you can't flush them. And the language coming out of the students' mouths, especially to some of the people, the teachers that are working the floors trying to help with the discipline problems, it's just off the wall. And we can sit here, and I'm not going to be one to sit here and blame it on the pandemic, because the pandemic was one thing we all had to deal with, but respect for your elders and humans in general, just normal respect for your fellow man, that should be one of the easiest things in the world, and it doesn't look like we have. At least there's a certain portion in that school that has no respect for nobody. I've heard examples of how Mr. Silver, for example, asked a child or a student for the hall pass. He puts some four-letter words together and tells him where to go and what to do with himself, and they keep on walking. Those people do not belong in the school the next day. And that's Trish, you're exactly right. If we don't crack down, it's not going to get better. And you're going to make a lot of people mad, but you got to do it. You got to make a difference. These kids lost all last year, as far as I'm concerned. That virtual learning, some of them maybe gained something. The majority of them didn't learn a thing. We can't afford, as people of Kent County, to lose another year. So I'm here as a county commissioner, and obviously anything that I say, I can't promise you anything without talking to my colleagues, but I can almost assure you from talking to them, I'm here to offer some assistance. Is one, there was talk early in the year about doing away with the resource officers by a certain group. I think probably there ought to be more resource officers right now until we get a handle on what's going on. If you think that would help, please call, and we're offering our assistance. I'm offering mine. So with me, you're halfway there. I'm sure we can get, my colleagues would agree with whatever it takes, because it's the most important thing facing Kent County today. And we can't allow the kids to lose another year. That's something you can't replace. And a lot of these kids, I got one in the 10th, grandkids in the 10th, got one in the 12th. They're supposed to be preparing themselves for future lives, for going to college and stuff. They're not going to learn nothing like this. We got to do better. And I'm glad to hear everybody talking about it, and I know you all are aware of it, but I just don't think sitting somebody in the corner or something is going to teach them nothing. If they're not fit to be in that school, they're not going to act right, send them home. Make the parents bring them back. You got to do something, and I don't know any other way, but you got to crack the whip a little bit. You got to make them sorry for what you got to make them pay. At least that way the rest of the kids have a chance to learn something. And it's not fair to the teachers. I mean, it's a good thing I'm not a teacher, I can assure you, because if they talk to me like I've heard they talk to some of their teachers, I'd probably be in jail. But nevertheless, they got a tough job, but it's not fair to them. And somebody's got to have their back. So that's about all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fithian. Okay, the next portion or next item on the agenda this evening is reports. Kent County Teachers Association. Ms. Bachman.
Hi again.
Hello.
Good evening. Dr. Couch, President Getz, members of the board, and Sam. Can't leave Sam out. KCTA is working to poll our members about negotiations so that we have our initial proposals available to you by November 15th. We look forward to working together this year in negotiations to retain teachers and attract new educators to our county. I know that one of our tasks will be to determine how best to move forward with the implementation of the blueprint for Maryland's future law and its impact on Kent County Public Schools. We are also working with HR and administration on some contract language issues, particularly surrounding quarantine. We hope to have this resolved before the end of the month. As I stated in August, a main goal of KCTA this year is to improve communication between all stakeholders. I am happy to say that every building has been able to set up a faculty advisory committee, and that if they have not met yet, they do plan to do so this month. We are hoping to also be able to dialogue with the community advisory committee so that teacher voices can be heard in the efforts to support our schools. Our executive board will have its first meeting with Dr. Couch this Wednesday. We are excited to discuss how we can work together to improve communication. We do know that there are areas to work on between faculty, central office, and also the community. For example, with central office, one of the things that we're hoping we can work on is releasing professional development schedules in a timely manner so that teachers can be prepared for PD days. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bachman. Okay, the next item on the agenda is board discussion. Sam, would you like to begin?
Of course.
Sure.
Good evening, Dr. Couch, President Getz, and fellow board members. I want to start tonight's discussion off with continued condolences and sorrow to the passing of KCPS student Madison Unikis. Madison graduated just last year and was a kind, honest, and responsible scholar and athlete. Getting to know Madison throughout high school was a great privilege, and my thoughts go out to Madison's family and all who were affected by her passing. Now on to school updates. From Kent County High School. Spirit Week is upon us, which concludes with the homecoming game on Thursday, October 14th. The homecoming dance is October 15th from 7 to 9 in the courtyard. Maryland College Application Week was a huge success. Thank you to Miss Andre Anderson for having so many colleges come and present to our juniors and seniors. Senior night athletic events will be taking place. Parent-teacher conferences will be held on Thursday, October 14th, and early fall assessments are almost completed. Now on to Kent County Middle School. On October 12th, interims will be mailed out. On October 13th is a home soccer game versus Cherry Hill Middle School at 3:30 p.m. On October 14th, parent-teacher conferences from 7:30 a.m. to 3:40 p.m. On October 21st, the PBIS event, Battle for the Banner, at KCHS from 12 to 1:30 p.m. And finally, October 25th is a home soccer game versus Elkton. On to Galena Elementary School. Galena is finishing up their Maryland State Early Fall Assessment in grades 4 and 5, and MAP and KRA assessments for the beginning of the school year data collected this month. Their school improvement team met and began diving into root analysis with preliminary data. On October 6th, there was an early dismissal. Teachers focused on data-driven grouping for interventions and enrichment groups, then participated in district-wide grade-level meetings. On October 8th, Hispanic Heritage Awareness activities with each grade level having a different country to focus on. On October 14th, Galena will be holding parent-teacher conferences. They will be requesting priority conferences to those families who were unable to attend the virtual back-to-school night last month. Galena is offering a choice of face-to-face and also virtual to allow more parent participation, including translation services as needed. On October 15th, Galena will be participating in district-wide professional development at KCHS. October 18th, Galena hopes to begin their character counts program this week, so they would love to have more volunteers. October 23rd, Chestertown Rotary is holding a soup and sip event at the kitchen at the Imperial 208 High Street from noon to 3 that will benefit Galena's Title I, One School, One Book activity. $25 includes a wine glass, 10 tastings, and raffle tickets. All are encouraged to attend. And then finally, October 29th, Galena will hold their Halloween socials, and their final school improvement plan will be posted on the website. On to Henry Highland Garnett Elementary School. On October 8th, from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m., was the outdoor book fair, and on October 14th, Parent-Teacher Conference Day. And then finally, Rock Hall Elementary School. The Rock Hall Elementary School Kazoo Band played at the Rock Hall Fall Fest this past Saturday with a musical tribute to Tom McHugh. It was well attended, and the band did an awesome job. On the 14th of October is the Rock Hall Elementary School Parent-Teacher Conferences, school closed for students. And the same day at 6 p.m. is the Rock Hall Elementary School PTA meeting. All are invited. And then finally, on October 15th, staff professional development, all schools closed for students at Rock Hall Elementary School. I want to step away from my normal board commentary to talk about a few things with Kent County High School. I want to first thank the staff who stood up and shared their experience, and I'd like to share my experience as a student. As you all know, I'm a senior at Kent County High School. With a lot of my peers, we've grown throughout the past four years within the high school. COVID-19 has taken an undeniable toll on our education, school environment, and even extracurriculars. But enough is enough. We cannot keep blaming a pandemic. I'm tired of students blaming each other, pointing fingers, and letting anger out on others. This is a problem that has affected students far too long, and I'm asking for you to please help us. Before I move into highlighting the frankly irresponsible and unsafe environment at KCHS, I want you to hear from a few students. The quotes that I'm about to read come from students ranging from freshmen to seniors, real students with real voices. The fights and behaviors at KCHS make me feel unsafe. Most of the students who are in fights are back in the building the next day. I do not even think they are being disciplined. The phone call made by the school was not acceptable. The immense amount of violence is really making Kent County an embarrassment. We need a strong administration that is 100% dedicated to improving the school and bringing back mutual respect. And finally, the recent acts of violence are putting both students and faculty at risk. I'm scared for what could happen next. Since the start of the school year, we've had numerous fights and numerous disciplinary issues. When members of the board and Kent County Public Schools have been alerted, the main responses seem to blame it on mental illness and students not being used to the building. If this was and is a mental illness problem, why are we not providing resources for our students? Where are the mental health procedures to stop these acts of violence? Next, students have been in the building, and the pandemic is not solely to blame. The pandemic did not cause the 10-plus person fight in the cafeteria. The pandemic did not cause students to clog toilets, rip toilet seats off, defecate on top, and jump on the sinks. The board's lack of management and acknowledgement is partially to blame. I have 2 college classes within the middle of my schedule. On Friday, September 17th, I watched a student push Mr. Graff onto the wall and try again and again to fight another student. I can only assume that this behavior was never addressed or disciplined, for I walked into the building the next day behind the student. Just last week, we had at least 5 fights. While my peers and I were selling homecoming tickets, I watched 2 students get in a verbal dispute. Administration did not de-escalate the situation, but rather told them to just sit down. 5 minutes later, the cafeteria broke into a multiple-person fight, with students violently tackling and hitting each other to the ground. The situation could have been easily avoided, and our SRO should not have been the one tackling to the ground repeatedly. But we continue to allow these events to happen. That night, a phone call went out to parents and said that this behavior would no longer be tolerated. Just the next day, we had another fight. Rhetorically asking each of you personally, how many times have you been in the building since the start of the school year? I'm in the building every day, along with the rest of the student body and faculty. Students are feeling unsafe, and so am I. It is disturbing my education, and you are allowing it to be disruptive. I understand that we have not had the full team and administration in the building, but with the full team, I'm still not confident that this behavior will subside. I've heard reports of students being disrespectful and out of control in the middle and elementary school level. The buildings are going to remain the same if you do not address it. This problem is present regardless of the amount of admin. We saw this just on Friday when you brought individuals from the central office to man the halls. We still had fights, still had disciplinary issues, and the bathroom still smelled like marijuana. Kent County High School administration has lost the students' respect, and it will not be gained until we take serious actions to turn the building around. We started with verbal disputes, then to one-on-one fights, and now we are having numerous individuals fighting. What is next? When will enough be enough? When will you address this? Will you finally listen when I get hurt, when my peers get hurt? Although, violence is not the only issue at Kent County High School. Students are frequently using slurs, specifically the F slur and N-word. I've heard it with my own ears more times than I can even count. Students are roaming the building, and students are not following the procedures. Another big issue at the high school is addressing the outdated dress code. However, the new administration has already put a dress code procedure for the high school in place. It is as followed, quoting from an actual class meeting. If you look in the mirror and think what you are wearing is inappropriate, then you probably shouldn't wear it to school. I think we can all agree that this is insensitive and incredibly irresponsible to not give detailed guidelines. But like the rest of the actions of the school, everyone is turning a blind eye. However, each day is a new day, and I have learned this, and I walk into the building with a clean slate. Change is needed, and we're all optimistic and open to the possibility of it. It's my senior year. I'm SGA president, and I'm so excited to continue to push the student body's interests as the SMOB and further the student's voice at KCHS. My focus should be on academics, college, and extracurriculars, but I'm distracted by the daily violence and disruptions in the building. I am deeply sorry that I must speak about the environment that I work in every day. It is distracting, it is scary, and I fear what is to come next. I believe that my concerns are shared with all of you. Some members even have students within Kent County Public Schools. But to allow this to get to the point of public outcry and distress is incredibly unprofessional of Kent County Public Schools administration, and we should never allow this to happen. We have been in school for over a month, and we continue to allow these actions to affect student health, academics, and well-being. Enough is enough. Please use your voice, regardless of your power in this school system. When I walk in the building every day, I fear what is to come next. What will these actions escalate to next? The students of Kent County High School are feeling unsafe, and no student should feel unsafe to attend their school and get an education. Thank you for your time, and please use your words and the words of others in consideration when addressing this matter. And real quick, I just want to go off script to talk about the class meetings that we had today. I was not present in the freshman, sophomore, and junior class meeting, but I actually timed the senior class meeting. It was 6 minutes long, and there was no line of what we're doing for discipline, like you said. It was more of just masses, state law, make sure you're wearing them. Fights are happening, let's make sure that we're not fighting anymore. So the meeting was only about 6 minutes long, which with normal class meetings, that is incredibly short. And it did not address the concerns. It just kind of talked about what has been happening and that, oh, we're not going to tolerate it anymore. But no disciplinary actions have been kind of outlined for students. And there's no kind of consequence at this time that has been outlined as well. So thank you.
Dr. Costa?
Oh, I'm very interested in what you're saying, and I hope we can address these issues. The most interesting thing I did since the last meeting was go to the annual school board conference in Annapolis that was just last week, and our board president here, Joe Getz, was elected president-elect of the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, MABE. I found the conference sort of disappointing in its content. Everybody talked about equity. That was the only word that was used consistently, but without much real commitment to the kind of deep changes that would need to come about for us to really have equity in the schools. Hard things like, moving heaven and earth to get kids on proficient by the end of grade 3, or having much shorter summer vacations so there isn't so much summer slide for poor children, longer school days, the kinds of things that KIPP schools have done with great results. I really didn't hear any concrete things that we as a local board could do to bring about equity. But the other thing I did just today was attend the meeting of the committee we have on equity and excellence, and I have a little more confidence that we're going to be able to do more than the things mentioned at the conference, which was pretty much nothing. So that's what I've been doing.
Ms. Sullivan?
I have wanted to say thank you to the teachers and administrators who came from the high school tonight, and I don't know if any, yes, a couple are still here. I think that the information that you shared tonight, it was valuable, and to Julie's point, communicating that information to the parents would be valuable too, and I hope that we can find a way to get that same content that was given out tonight to the parents. I think that would be great. And I thank you again for coming in tonight. Joe Getz and I were at the school today. We came in about a little before noon and stayed for 2 of the lunch sessions and walked around the school. And, you know, perhaps it was a Monday, perhaps we were, you know, our authoritarian presence was calming on the students, but it seemed like a calm environment when we were there. And, you know, there were a couple things that we talked about how there could be some improvements, but we'll talk about those things and see. I'd like to spend some more time in the high school. Also, I do have a middle schooler right now, so we'll be heading to the high school soon. So I'm happy with all the work that the PTSA is doing. I really appreciate how engaging you've been and all the great events that you have coming up, so thank you for that. I'm on the EdSpec committee for Kent County Middle School, and we had our first meeting, and I'm excited to be working with Dr. Lever again and the rest of the committee. We toured Kent County Middle School, and it was eye-opening, some of the things that we learned, and I look forward to how we move forward, and we'll be able to report to the board early next year, I think. So, thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, good evening once again. Mid-September, I was able to tour all of our school facilities. That includes the high school, our middle school, our 3 elementary schools, our bus depot, and our Board of Education office. When I was there, I was greeted by our administrators, walked around and had some great discussions about what is going on, how the first weeks of school have been. At times when I was there, things were quiet, so it would look like everybody was getting into the groove of the school year. Since I'm back to work, it's harder for me to get into the schools like I used to during the pandemic and before, but it was good to see the students and the scholars learning. I also attended the MABE conference. The conversation on equity was my idea, but I understand Dr. Costa's frustrations at times, but that is quite okay. While we were there, I know Dr. Costa, myself, and President Getz, we heard from student members of the board from 5 jurisdictions. I want to say Montgomery County, Charles County, Carroll County, Baltimore County, and Anne Arundel County. They spoke on some of the work that they're doing on their individual boards. It was good to hear student perspective. While we were there, we heard from different keynotes. One thing that I enjoy about the conference atmosphere is that we have the ability to network with other individuals and share what we are doing in our individual jurisdictions and how diverse and different we are from. I know Dr. Costa and I had a conversation with 2 members from Baltimore County, and it was like night and day. But also understanding that they're going through some of the similar challenges that we are going on here. I also had the pleasure of attending with Dr. Costa the Committee on Equity and Excellence for our district. It was nice to hear the that we are striving with our initiative for our black male students. I continue to be skeptical about this initiative. I do not find it, it seems like we're striving to get the kinks rolled out, but I would like to hear more. So maybe at the next board meeting that could be brought up so we can actually have a little deeper discussion, especially about the de-escalation training that has all educators at the high school have taken. I would like to hear more about that. Again, we are at a crux in our public educational system. What we once knew is no longer the same. Students are participating in devious lick challenges. These challenges are found that are radicalizing our students from TikTok, YouTube, and other social media platforms. Fighting. Students are coming to school geared up to fight other students for sometimes no particular reasons. And students are also always coming to us with social emotional concerns more than we can imagine. It is imperative that we now more than ever tap into the power of education, but it does start with us top down. It starts with each and every one of us up on this platform, down to our central office administration, to our teachers, to our principals, to our parents, to our students. We must ensure safety for all of our students and our educators in our buildings. I have had the pleasure of talking to my grandmother, who is my brother's legal guardian, and she has come to me sometimes upset and scared and wondering what the next day is going to present. And it is heartbreaking at times to hear that, from a system that we believe in, that there is this fear. But I, again, always and have always supported King County Public Schools and remain hopeful. We must ensure fairness and equity for all our children and our educators. We should make sure our schools are inviting and warm, and we must seek to understand to be understood. I continue to be appreciative of our educators and the achievements of our scholars, and I can continue to honor the parents that continue to trust us with their children day in and day out. However, it is now time that we must define our culture and our community. There is no past for what has happened, and we must hold the students, everyone, accountable from this board down for the actions. But it is now time to replant. It's now time to pick up. And it's now time to figure out what we need to do to make sure this is a safe and warm environment for our students, an environment that promotes learning and academic excellence for all students. I continue to thank you, Dr. Couch, for your leadership. President Getz, I continue to thank you, and the rest of the board members as well. So let us work together to bind up whatever is in our way so that we can promote the education that we want for our students and that the public and our educators want for our students. Thank you.
Ms. McGee?
I want to thank the teachers from King County High School that came here tonight to tell us firsthand what they're doing. I could hear the angst in their voices that they're experiencing all the emotions that we're experiencing as community members and as parents. And I think back to what Ms. Bachman said last month, talking to us about what the last year's been like for teachers. And, they're still dealing with their own personal repercussions from COVID. They're trying to take care of their own families. And I just remember her telling us, they're probably going to step back a little bit because they need to. And now I feel like we've just added to their burden. So I want to thank them for stepping up. I've said my piece about the discipline. I joke about this, but I might as well put it out there. I got suspended when I was at the 10th grade at Kent County High School, and it was a long time ago. And it was for saying one cuss word in the lunchroom to a student with no adult hearing it. And I got suspended for 5 days. I got zeros across the board with no opportunity to recoup my grade. And as bad as that was, what was waiting for me at home was even worse. So I learned my lesson, and I can still see my mother saying to me, "You better buckle down." And I learned that lesson the hard way. you know, it wasn't so long ago, we were wringing our hands about Kent County Middle School. You know, it was the weak link in Kent County Public Schools, and that is no longer the case. So I do know it's possible to turn things around. I'm hopeful that we can do it. I look at the letter that went out from the high school last week, and I feel that it's lacking. If I'm a parent who has no clue that something had been going on at the high school, and I read this, during the school year, there have been multiple incidences of inappropriate behavior. My definition of inappropriate behavior and Dr. Costa's definition may be different. I don't see anything wrong with standing up and taking ownership and saying right off the bat what happened. And you can hardly find that anywhere in this, and I'm disappointed in that. There were some people patting themselves on the back because they thought they'd done such a great job. We got a letter out, and we had a robocall. I know there's nothing we can do about it, but move forward. I want to ask Sam, who has, you know, taken us to task every meeting. So from a student standpoint, what sort of things do you think we need to do that need to be changed?
I mean, I think that the class meeting was a perfect way to, you know, address concerns and kind of buckle down, like you said, on students and make sure that you have that mutual respect. But we saw today that we completely steered past that and had a meeting that just took away from education and had nothing that was really relevant to the current state of our building because it did not address student actions in a way that was then going to promote positive behavior. But I feel like having class meetings and having the administration give mutual respect to the students is the start, because you're not going to have students respect you until you show that you respect them with personal connections and relations between students. And that's can be hard for a new administration, specifically with new students coming in the building, because to get to know the students and get to know respect, you have to get to know their names and, you know, who they are and stuff like that. And we this year have 2, you know, new classes instead of just 1, so that can be pretty hard. But I think that it all comes from mutual respect and having the students feel as though going outside the boundaries and having negative behavior is gonna, you know, inhibit more than just a suspension, but their peers' education and those around you. So I believe that it comes down to mutual respect and having students understand that their behavior doesn't only affect them, but everyone around them.
Okay.
Can I ask
Yeah.
you a question? Would it help to have some kind of, within the student government, to have some kind of student court or restorative justice mechanism?
Of course, I definitely think so. I know that the student government has been really struggling this year because we don't have a SGA advisor right now. So we've been having to kind of man the SGA with the help of amazing advisors like Ms. Saunders and stuff to kind of help us get back in the swing of things and do SGA things. So that's really hindered us as well. But I believe that having some sort of student court and having students at the forefront is definitely going to help. I know that a couple years back, under, I think it was Mr. Keckley, my freshman year, we had a spirit kind of committee where we had students come together to bring spirit back in the building. And we would meet before school in the principal's office, and we'd sit at the table and just discuss and see what we liked, see what we didn't like, and maybe having something like that with students, but talking about discipline or just talking about how students feel accountability has been held within the building.
Is there, I think back to when the teachers made their presentation, that there is a faculty advisory committee. Is there anything in place, or do you think it could be established where not the whole darn school,
Yeah.
but representatives, you know, have, I mean, once a month, quarterly, somehow get to sit down with the principal and say, you know, this is what we're hearing, this is what's
Yes.
going on. How would you make that happen?
I think that that's something that would have to then, of course, come first through the principal and what they see that looking like and how they want to facilitate that, because students can be on board for something like that, but we first have to have admin on board, because students can facilitate something like that, but at the end of the day, without, you know, administration pulling that together, that's not something that would really work out with just students
But
meeting.
do you think that the students may be the ones that have to take the first step. Somebody like you're the SGA president and the Honor Society president and the student member of the board, you carry a lot of juice.
Yes.
Could you go to a principal and say, you know, it's been the topic of a school board meeting, you know, we're live streaming, who knows how many households are watching this, we know it's a problem, we want to be part of the solution.
Yes.
Give us some guidance, how do we do that?
I will, and I have, and I know other students have. I just had a meeting last week with a group of individuals at the high school who have met and had meetings with Mr. Graff about some of their concerns in the building. Students already have, and students are continuing to stand up for this. But like I said, I mean, without having that mutual respect and mutual engagement, it's not going to go anywhere.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate everything that was said, no need to go through it again. I just want to thank Commissioner Fithian for being here tonight. It's much appreciated for being here, and also the olive branch to assist or be a part of the solution. I just appreciate that, and I would hope you and can't speak for everyone, but I'll just say that I'm sure we all appreciate you being here, and certainly there's always time here for you or your colleagues to come. So, you know, certainly would offer that invitation as well to come back.
All you got to do is ask us.
Thank you.
Tell us what you need.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, the next portion of the meeting is the education.
Mr. Getz, I'm sorry. I
Please.
just had a thought. Can we just tell Beck? I wanted to hear more. I'm sorry. I hate to just indulge this moment, but I do want to hear more from Sam on the mutual respect side. Could you just dig deeper? I don't know what that looks like, but I would like to hear more.
Yeah, so I kind of see that mutual respect as having students, you know, wanting to come to the school, wanting to be in the building, and then having administration, you know, positively pursue that behavior and continue to encourage students to be excited for their academics and their extracurriculars. That's something through, you know, getting to know students, having one-on-one conversations, having that bond between a student, and at the end of the day, realizing that if a student does do wrong, has a negative behavior, that punishment is something that you and the student sit down and realize that it's something that was an action that was demonstrated by them, but it does not define them, and realize that, you know, you can grow from punishments, and it's not a cycle, it's something that you can break. So I think that a lot of it comes down to, you know, first disciplining and then teaching students that, you know, the behavior can be reversed and turned into something positive.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Section 8 for this evening on the agenda is Education Services. The first item, item A, is Board Policy BCF, Citizens Advisory Committee.
Okay, so I've gone back and I've added the additional changes that the board has asked me to do. I've highlighted those in blue. Noting what you had indicated that you wanted said, that it's not a super committee and will not provide oversight to standing or ad hoc committees. Added in the specific 2 members from each school, 2 members from Kent County High School, 2 members from Kent County Middle School, specific in that regard. All positions must be seated before this CAC shall be active as a committee. The CAC members may not serve more than 2 consecutive terms. A quorum of the committee members must be present to conduct a meeting. And I think that pretty much concludes the additional changes that I added based on our conversation at the last board meeting.
So if approved, this would be, because this has to come back for our last reading, correct?
Yes.
So by December, we would have
Yes.
to have that with by January start date. Is that what I'm
Yes.
assuming?
We need to have time for people to apply and a process for them to apply.
So, okay. We got that.
I was just going to say, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Couch for being patient. And, I mean, this is about the 4th iteration of how we started. And I do know that, you know, at some point, we just got to bite the bullet and either go forward or not go forward. We have a looming deadline. If we want to be able to get this in place, start at the beginning of the calendar year, I don't know if we move back the deadline for people to apply. I don't know if we can do that for this first initial year. The other thing is we are having a work session in 2 weeks. Is that something we can put on that'll give us 2 weeks? Is that something we can put on the agenda for 2 weeks and get it and take a vote, or?
I think we can.
Okay. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. Dr. Costa has said in the past how she feels about it, so I don't know if she's changed her opinion or not, but, and I'm only speaking for myself. I want to,
I think if we don't have any additional changes, I think that voting at the work session is good, and then we can start the process for applications.
If it passes.
Correct.
If it passes, correct.
So I'll put this on the work session.
Yeah, and I just want to add, thank you for adding the additional comments to Trish's point. It's been, we've been back and forth on it, but, it means something to get it right, so thank you for that.
Can I just ask for clarification on why we're not going to vote on this tonight? I'm just a little confused.
Pardon, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So we're not going to vote on this tonight?
No.
Okay,
We'll vote on it.
why is that?
We'll vote, because
It's a first reading
it's
of
a
the
first
revision.
reading of the next changes that we put into place. So it was like, I had to go back and reinsert new comments from the board. It was very, it wasn't clear to me that all of this is what we wanted, and I think I'm waiting for direction from the board in terms of whether there were additional changes that needed to be added as well. So our policy says it has to be first reading and then second reading as approval. So this is the first reading of the changes that I've made.
Okay, thank you.
Is the board okay with the October 25th?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
I'm okay.
I'm okay. I'm more than okay.
Okay, so Dr. Couch, if you could have this ready for the October 25th work session, and then we'll go ahead and take action upon it.
Okay,
Which is 2 weeks away.
it's fine.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the board policy BBF ethics policy.
Yes. This is basically a redo of what we currently have in place. I spent some time talking to the State Ethics Commission in terms of our policy, and initially what I planned to do was take our existing policy and make all of the additional changes, which were, basically following COMAR and then making those changes, which they didn't follow exactly in our policy, exactly the alignment of COMAR, but all of those pieces were in. And when I spoke with General Counsel, they indicated that that would really complicate our ability to get it approved through the State Commission, and he highly recommended that we look at Model Policy B and just go from scratch and just start over. He said that, to actually go through and look at the changes that I made, he said that he's certain that they were there, but, it's just a matter of just, if we want to expedite making it through their approval process, he said that is one that they recommend. And I looked at other school board policies, and they're pretty much following the Model Policy B anyways. I think that's precisely why he said follow that. He did alert me that there's going to be some additional changes that are going to come down at the end of the year, so we'll have to bring it back again for a second time. But I sent him this Model Policy B, and you'll note that it's all in red, meaning it's all new. But the highlighted and bold, or the bold red, are the specific additions that I put pertaining to Kent based on the model policy. So he's already presented it to his bosses, and they've already got it noted to be approved at the December meeting that they have. And so my recommendation is this is first reading, and I'm hopeful that we can get it passed in November.
This item is for information. Is there any questions
I also wanted to note that you'll see a complaint form that I put in there. And talking to the commission, they said that that is not required. It is certainly, the policy is pretty clear in terms of what is required to issue a complaint. Although if you do have a complaint form, it certainly makes it easier to make sure that all of the required information is in place. So I looked and checked some other school systems to see what kind of complaint forms they had. And this was really I thought was easiest, and it definitely contained all of the required information that would be necessary to issue a complaint to the Ethics Commission. Ethics panel, excuse me.
How often, just curious, how often do school systems receive ethics complaints?
School systems?
Yeah.
I can't speak to other school
Maybe
systems.
this.
As far as our school system, I think the last time there was a complaint was it was prior to my coming to Kent County, but I think it might have been like 4 years prior to my arrival, so it's been quite a while.
And this form that you've put together is not currently in our current policy, which
No.
is, okay,
So it would be added as an attachment.
makes sense. Any further questions, comments regarding the ethics policy? Okay, that was for information only.
Right.
The next item on the agenda in Section 8C, District Reopening Plan, Quarantine, Tutor Support, and Assessments. And I see Ms. Giacomo's coming forward.
Good evening, President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board.
Good evening.
The last time I presented, we had submitted our reopening plan to the state board for review and approval. On September 30th, we received approval of our plan, and it not only was approved, but that was also the date that the final draft was officially posted on our website. Our plan is also available both in English and in Spanish as well. The ratings, we had no ratings that were in the developing range. They were all either in the acceptable or commendable range in our overall plan. The area of equity, as you know, is one of the main pillars of both our strategic plan and our reopening plan, and it's a word that we've heard echoed several times tonight. In the rubric that was provided, we received comprehensive, which is the highest score you can get in every segment of the equity portion of our plan. And one of the things that pushed it to that level is that equity is not just a one-stop shop in our plan, but it's woven throughout. And our district has shown the commitment that it's making in terms of educational rigor, the resources, and the support that we have planned to really maximize success, both for academics as well as social-emotional learning. The plan also emphasized the ways that we are addressing the existing structural inequities, and they included things such as additional tutoring, opportunities before school, and additional support provided with support sessions based on identified academic and social and emotional needs. During this report, I'd like to just share with you where we are in terms of our comprehensive assessment plan. We shared earlier, and we will bring the actual data when we have our work session, that we have been moving forward fast and furiously with administering assessments, beginning with the early fall assessment, as well as the kindergarten readiness assessment. The early fall assessment, students were taking that to assess how well they mastered the skills and knowledge from the previous grade level. And those results are coming in. Preliminary results are, at this point, being reviewed at the district level. In addition to that, we've also given a round of measures of academic progress. That is not a new assessment for us. We have always given that. However, This year, as you had suggested and directed us, we have set it up so that we will be able to look at student group data as well as the overall performance. So when we share our results with you, we will be looking both at how all students are performing by grade level, but also how student groups are performing as well. New to the measures of academic progress is an area that measures early reading fluency, and it's also an early screener for dyslexia. This is a requirement from the state, and this particular screener was given to all students, kindergarten through grade 3. The screener is something that we are learning to unpack the results, and it includes things such as hearing little 5-year-olds reading with a mask on into the microphone as they are assessing something called rapid automatic naming. So they look at a picture such as a tree, a cat, a frog, it flashes past and it measures both the speed and accuracy. These are all critical predictors of possible future reading difficulties, so it will allow us to get in front of that early on. I got excited and jumped ahead here, sorry. The thing that is very different this year in terms of formative assessment is the system-wide use of a platform called Edulastic. And it is with great pride that I share with you our teachers have absolutely embraced this at the classroom level. So this is a platform that has a very vast item bank with items that are aligned to the standards of the grade level. It also allows teacher choices if you have students that are performing either below or above level to really use that information and gear assessments to their individual needs and assess what they are learning at the time. These release items have all been vetted, and so they not only have quality questions in the item bank, but the best part is it gives the teacher instant data at their fingertips, which is something that's important if you're really trying to do meaningful small group instruction. It also allows students to monitor their own progress. So there are reports that we will be able to print and share with families from very different number of assessments that I've talked about tonight, from the MAP assessment to the fluency assessment, even to the classroom-based assessments. There are opportunities for students to really take charge of their own learning as well. The next part of this report is just to give you a glimpse in time of where we are as a district. You can see the window. This data was provided to me by Van Hamlin. He's in the role of really working with Tracy Williams and Student Service Department and handles much of the questions and confirmation and research and stays current on practices in terms of COVID. So what you see here are just the current number of students in each school that have been quarantined during that window. And one of the things that our district has chosen to do is to really keep tight the importance of being able to provide education, whether they are in school or at home. So through ESSER funding, we have advertised, and in 3 of our schools, we've secured what's called a tutor/contact tracer. So it's an instructional assistant position that will be available to work under the direction of the building principal to provide times to check in, offer academic support, and also have a contact for the families at the school level. The other schools are in the interview process. I'm looking at Mr. Hushin because I know right before the meeting we saw that one other principal will be bringing forward the name for that person in their school as well. If only we had that ESSER funding super early, we would have been able to have them in place right on day one. But I know that we are all acting on that fast and furiously because this is a critical point in really giving that additional support that our students so deserve. The last piece is the importance of school improvement teams with the work that we are doing, and it does connect in terms of linking our work from our strategic plan to our reopening plan. And so I think you heard mentioned earlier that some of our teams, in fact, I think Sam had shared with some of the school announcements that they have involved community members and families in the school improvement learning process, and several of them have conducted their initial root cause analysis process. And that's all part of the training that our school teams have participated in. We have a year-long series of trainings that we'll receive in being able to really tighten up the work that our school teams are doing so that they can align the work of the district with the school and the classroom, ultimately leading to better results. So tonight's presentation for the reopening plan really centered around, one, informing the public that our plan was approved, two, going over the quarantine and academic support, and three, the assessment pieces, just to be sure that you know where we are in terms of administering and analyzing that assessment data. So with that, I will just ask if there are any questions or comments related to the reopening update.
I have just a couple questions on the numbers for the quarantine and academic support side. Is a student considered quarantined until just until they receive a negative result on a test?
I was looking to see if Tracy was there.
So like Galena, I mean, that number seems pretty high, but is that just showing that's not 82 kids that have been quarantined for 10 days? It's just up until they get a negative
That's
COVID
correct.
test? Okay.
Correct. They were not all out for 10 or even 14 days.
Okay.
When they're able to show the negative tests, they can return, as long as they don't have any symptoms.
And then the school improvement teams, is that a requirement or a product of being a Title I designated school, or is that?
So
that all school
Title I
districts are doing?
schools have some additional requirements. They have 10 components that they must address. So 4 of our 5 schools are Title I schools, but every school is required to have a school improvement team and a school improvement plan that involves not only staff, but community as well. Parents and community are part of that process as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We continue to ask this question until we get some results. What are we doing for our goals, especially for our academic goals for this year? How is that coming along? With our teachers still feeling comfortable with those goals and our principals to.
So I can tell you that they are driving the decisions that are made daily in terms of the work that our administrators are doing, as well as our classroom teachers. If you're asking for some examples of
No examples. I just want to know
Right.
we're still on track.
Well, exactly. I mean, yes, so that's really what we're responsible for doing, so, yes.
I'd be curious in hearing, I get it at Maine with my colleagues, and I was talking to a colleague from Howard County, and she was very adamant her board had just voted in a way to continue in-district assessments. And it was very eye-opening because I've been a bit proponent of, getting all the data points as we can. We do in-county assessments, correct?
That's correct. We have never had a platform as fancy as the one we have this year, but we've always given what we call local assessments. We give classroom-based that the teacher will develop, but then our teacher teams, and at the middle school they do the same thing, they have content teams where they develop common assessments that every child in that grade level will experience at the end of a unit.
But then we also give the MAP assessment, which is our,
Right, universal.
universal assessment as well.
How many times is that given?
The MAP?
3 times.
Yeah.
Right.
3 times.
3 times a year. How many hours does it take?
So the new assessment, the dyslexia screener, takes approximately 20 minutes. That's the fastest assessment. The others can take, depending on, because they're adaptive, so if you have someone that's perhaps a more proficient reader, it may take them a little bit longer to get through that assessment. It can be anywhere from 18 minutes to as long as 70 minutes, depending on the child's needs and their level of learning. They don't give it all at once. They give ELA on one day, mathematics on another day. So they break it up so that they're not spending a whole day assessing. It might be a chunk of the day that they'll do a portion of the assessment.
Are there any additional questions?
Yeah, I had something really quick. So I did some outside research about Edulastic, and I just think it's a really cool program, and just how the statistics are given to the teachers and stuff. I think that's something that's definitely going to help with like mastery of standards. I just had a question about is that just something that's for elementary level, or is that for everyone?
That's a great question. So it's available at all levels, but there are more available resources at elementary and middle.
Gotcha.
It's a little trickier, I think, and probably not as readily available for, say, something like physics.
Yeah.
I don't know that Edulastic has that specific content in there.
Any additional comments, questions? Okay, that item was for information only. Ms. Giacomo, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Giacomos.
Okay, the next portion of the agenda is the administrative services piece. The first item in that section is expenditures revenue report. Ms. Stewart is walking forward.
Good evening, Dr. Couch, President Getz, members of the board.
Good evening.
We're going to go over the revenue and expenditure report. This is as of September 30th to 2021. And the first page that you will see is our cash receipts and our summary of cash receipts. Fund 1, we have about $9.7 million to date. Fund 3, which is our school construction, $84,000 to date. Fund 5, which is our food service, we do have $116,000 to date, and nothing for our trust and agency fund, which is Fund 7, what gives us a total of about $9.9 million that we have received in cash receipts to date as of September 30th, 2021. We scroll down to our current expense fund. We have expended about 67% of our budget so far. We get to our school construction fund, we're about 81%. And with this, as you can see, I have broken everything down. We still have work that's being done with at Galena. We have our parking lot. There's still some upfront costs that we have to do with the roof replacement and the cost for the track. And then we have our food service fund, where we have expended about 47% to date. And our restricted funds, as you can see, we have uploaded some of the funds that we received for fiscal year 22, but in October, we would have everything together as we were kind of working through our audit. Ooh, sorry about that. And then the last page that I've kind of added was just a funding overview, as you can kind of do your comparisons and see what we have received and expended to date. And then that is the end. There's no action needed from the board. It was just for information purposes. Any questions?
Ms. Stewart, just a question. Earlier this evening, there was comment about ESSER funding that hasn't come in yet. Is that, did I hear that was like around $5 million around there, or is that, did I hear that wrong?
We did receive approval from that, and we did receive approval to start spending on that. Before, it was, we had to submit, we submitted the application, but then after that, the agency wanted more clarification on the reopening plan and the ESSER 3 funding. So we had to meet with the agency to give them the clarification that they needed, and then they recently award that, and I will be discussing that in the next section.
Thank you. What a great segue. Thank you for that. That was for information purposes only. And now for ESSER 3 update, Ms. Stewart.
All right, so thankfully we were awarded the ESSER 3 funding. I do note that they're still going underway, because with ESSER 3 funding, there is a maintenance of equity requirement that we have to commit to. So we're only going to be able to receive about 2/3 of the funding, and then once that has been confirmed, then we'll receive the rest of the funding. Please note that we're not going to expend these funds all up front, but one of the pretty much what it seemed like the only issue that the agency had with our budget was that I kind of lumped things in other charges given the uncertainty. So they really wanted us to break out specifically what we were going to do with the ESSER 3 funding. So we went back to the drawing board. I had discussions with Dr. Couch and other team members, and just what have we been incurring so far, and we've also included in this budget remote learning should we have to even return to that. Now please note that 20% of this funding, which is $1,447,309.20, has to be dedicated at least to learning loss. We can use the other funding for learning loss, but that is one of the major requirements with this. The maintenance of equity portion, we have to definitely show that we are being equitable across the board. So they are looking at our staffing, they're looking at the education being provided to the students. We actually have to do a report, and the ESSA student per pupil report that I kind of do, I know that they're going to be looking at that for that maintenance of equity. So also, if there needs to be any changes between now and September 30th, 2024, we can go back and make a budget amendment. But this is what we've concluded so far. So at the top for learning loss, we have added 2 SPED IAs for intervention teaching, instructional tech support, because with ESSER 3 funding, there is specific data that we have to show and demonstrate. So we've included that additional tech support to assist with that, Edulastic and any formatives. There is a need for our ESOL support. So there are 2 positions that are budgeted in this funding to assist with ESOL support. And then also a SPED teacher to assist with infants and toddlers in testing and play groups. If you go down to contractual, we have budget contractual for Imagine Language, Imagine Espanol, Imagine Math, Inquiry Journeys, Nusuela, Restorative Practice Training, and that is your elementary, middle school, and high. We do have the Wanders, which is with McGraw-Hill, and Pyramid Training, and this consists of with pre-K, SPED, and infants and toddlers, and that's all the contractual that we had dedicated with learning loss. And then we have about 15,000 that was remaining out of everything that we need to do pertaining to learning loss that we have coded for materials and supplies that may be needed for teachers and students to assist with the learning loss. And then the other charges, which is FICA, and this is the FICA pension and health that goes along with the salary and wages for the learning loss piece. So then the other portion of the money we're using, we set aside about $600,000 for personnel pertaining to our budget. With the unknowns and even with the new Kerwin funding that is coming down the pipe, we are definitely, honestly, unsure of how that's really going to look. And so we set aside money because one of the one of the allowable expenses in ESSER is that we want to prevent layoffs. So this will assist us should, something happen with the current funding. We do have another cushion through ESSER 3 to help us with that and support us with that. We're hiring hopefully a teacher specialist, and this is for the high school for a testing coordinator. We are in need of custodians, so there is a full-time position for custodians and then 3 part-time positions. We have filled 2 of the 3 part-time positions. And then there is a need for bus driver support, as you all are aware, the driver shortage that are had, so this will assist us to maintain providing student transportation. Then you will see there is the public relations coordinator that we have budgeted to assist us as well. A guidance counselor to assist students with mental health. 5 IAs, and this is what Ms. Gina was talking about that we added into the grant. So each school will have an IA that will be assisting with COVID contact tracing and of the like. We have added remote learning. So when there was, we had to turn to virtual, there was the need for childcare. And so there was the use of IAs assisting KCPS employees, students, that could come into the school and they could provide oversight of their children while they are working. So we kind of put that in the budget just in case should we go to remote learning. And then we set aside about $200,000 extra, excuse me, for other personnel. This can include substitutes, tutors, more ESOL assistants, equity training, or anything else that will assist our personnel. We come down to contractual. We have money for PD training. This includes safety protocols, SPED, missed service, and other instructional developmental needs. We have budget for after-school programs and summer school programs. Now, we still have the ESSER 2 funding that is remaining, and we did not use all of what we had budgeted for summer 1. So we will be regrouping for summer 2. So we may have funds left over in ESSER 2 to pull from that where we can use the summer school money for something else. Or we may not have to use as much and can rebudget it somewhere else. But it's there, just in case. Restorative practices, there's a money set aside for that. The next that you would see, all that's coded to remote learning, and I've worked with Bill Poor with this. All of that's coded to remote learning is everything that takes in order for us to go remote. So should we have to shut down, we are ready. So I've worked with Bill, and this is what we have. I did add a extra year for Schoology because Schoology is being covered, I want to say, from 2023 in ESSER 1, which will absorb most of ESSER 1 we have absorbed. But this adds this extra year because Schoology has been a benefit even though the kids are back in school. So should we have that, we do have everything in place. And this is all that's needed to have that in place. And you will see that there. And then we have any money set aside for that child care, and as well as PD training, literacy interventions, and PLCs. Coming down to materials and supplies, we were able to budget about $200,000 for student school furniture. So that was approved. Computer supplies, yes. Computer supplies for our teachers. Now this is I want to say two separate, but it can kind of go hand in hand. We have set aside where we can get iPads because I know that for kindergarten readiness, there were iPads that the administration would need. And there's also money that's set aside for, laptops or Chromebooks should a student need it or a staff member need it just in case should something happen with learning. Playgroups with infants and toddlers. We did set aside money for materials and supply just for our students. So I noticed that a lot of our administration, from our principals and teachers, there was some funding when ESSER initially came out. We allowed that one-stop shop to just get everything as time was going. But with this funding, if there's anything that they need to assist them with learning and teaching in this pandemic, we did set aside money just for them. So they would just need to, let me know. And some of those expenses can be approved through this award. Student population as a large, it is part of my heart. And I ask this question all the time. What does our students really want? And I wanted to set money aside just solely for our students. So if there's anything the students are saying at our elementary schools, our middle schools, our high school, this money really is to help assist them. And I want them to know that we are thinking about them. And so that $100,000 is set aside for anything that we need. So I think that that's important. Materials and supplies, we set aside for custodial supplies, cleaning supplies, PPE, masks, any of the like, we have that there. And then also there is $22,000 that we set aside for mental health and social needs with KCPS students and staff. We're able to rebudget. So again, here's money. We do have money for that. And I have asked that, if there's anything to help with students with mental health or, our guidance counselors may need some materials to help with that. There's funding for that as well. We have funding for AP testing for our farm students who may not be able to afford those testing, the testing fees, and Promethean boards. So we have Promethean boards for the high school because it's my understanding, I think the high school is the only school that does not have the updated Promethean boards. So we do have that, so we're excited about that. And then you'll see the other charges, which are fixed charges pertain to the salary of the additional funding above the learning loss, and then indirect costs, which is about $459,000. Now, how indirect costs works, it doesn't really become revenue until you expend the money. So it doesn't mean that if we don't expend all the funding, we're not going to get this whole indirect cost. But the indirect cost can help with every administrative cost or indirect cost that goes directly into assisting us with managing this award. So the total amount of this award was $5,236,956. Any questions?
I do have a question about the Imagine language and Espanol math and inquiry journeys. Is this a whole new curriculum, or is this an addition to our curriculum?
It's called the Imagine Suite, and it's part of our intervention suite. So it's not the core program, it's not delivered to all students as part of Tier 1. It would be for identified students, and some of it addresses enrichment, other pieces are for intervention.
But how do you have time for that? I mean, without adding to the school day?
Actually, our principals have built-in time into their day, and each school, it looks a little different. They have staggered intervention times, so it's part of what you heard me say earlier, when you have the small group rotations, that's when one of the small group rotations is the Imagine Suite for the identified students.
Okay. What is restorative practice training?
Restorative practices are part of the social emotional learning curriculum. So it's actually, you've heard of PBIS.
Yeah.
So that's one of the practices that we've used for a number of years. But restorative practices have more specific strategies and techniques that the school can use to really be preventative in terms of student behaviors, but also recognizing the positive and having a common language to both reinforce the positive and also de-escalate situations that may be causing challenges within a small group setting or the classroom setting.
Okay, thanks.
I just I always want to commend you, Miss Stewart, for your hard work in putting together this document. I was really touched for your line here on the student population at large. I think that is, at times that's we don't think about it that way. There are students that really want a lot, and sometimes they can't provide, and we can't provide because we don't have the resources. So just that line. I think this is a question for Mr. Poor. While I see the line item here for the high school, are all of our classrooms updated with Promethean boards, or just some of our classrooms?
For the high school or other
For
schools?
the whole district.
For the whole district, so the other schools use Title I funding to replace theirs, and they are almost at the point where every room has been replaced. For example, I'll use the middle school. There's one or two special ed rooms which are still to be replaced, but my understanding is those have been ordered and they're on their way in. So the hope is at the end of this, once the high school is replaced, it will be a 100% replacement.
And I'm finally glad to also see that we can finally get the school furniture replaced that we have been putting in the budget time after time. So that is also very exciting.
I want to echo Naivik's compliments that it's very thoughtfully laid out, and I'm glad it's all been approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions on that? No?
No, I just want to echo my thanks to Elisa, Ms. Stewart. She's worked really hard on this, and I know staff has worked really hard in terms of providing additional input, but she was the one who pulled it all together and completed the document.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 2023 capital improvement plan, CIP.
Good evening, President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board. I'm here tonight to present for your approval the fiscal year 23 capital improvement program. If you guys remember, this is our annual submission to the IAC, or the Interagency School Commission on School Construction, that essentially gives them an idea of what we're planning for the future in this current fiscal year and future fiscal years. So for fiscal year 23, so next year, we are basically putting in our funding request for the Kent County High School roof replacement project. So This will be a two-year roof replacement project, so it's beneficial for both the state and the county that it's not a one-year project, so they can kind of spread funds out equally over 2 years. The first year is going to be a little bit higher solely due to the fact that we have to obviously order all the materials in the first year, so that kind of takes up a lot of the budget in the first year. And then it will be equally spread after that for the rest of those 2 years. So as you probably could expect, the initial estimates that we had from about 6 to 8 months ago that we received from our designer, they've gone up a little bit, obviously over the course of the last year or so. Actually not as much as we were kind of initially expecting, to be honest. So as of right now, the project is estimated as about $7.2 million for the construction side of things. The initial estimates were about 6.6 as of a year or so ago. The good thing about that anyway is that is on the absolute high end of it that we expect. The other good news is that we've kind of diligently worked through the process that we should be in line to bid it out in January or February of this coming winter, which that is the optimal time to bid anything out, because that is kind of when all contractors kind of reset their calendars and start planning for the upcoming year. So you typically get a lot more competitive pricing at that time of year as opposed to if you were to do it in the springtime or the fall time. So that would handle fiscal year 23 and 24. And then the next component of the submission is to basically let them know what else we have in the future coming down the line. So obviously we've discussed the educational specification for the Kent County Middle School. So that would be the next major project in the timeline. So with this submission, we are letting them know that this time next year we'll be submitting our planning approval submission. And also by this time next year, we should have our ed spec, of course, done, as well as our feasibility study. So we will have a good idea and recommendation of what we plan to do with the Kent County Middle School by this time next year. So at that time, we will let them know basically what our plan is. They then have to approve that for the planning side of things. And then in the following year, we will start requesting the funding for that project. And then there's a couple other small pieces of the submission. Those are kind of the major points. But then we also have to update them on past projects, how complete we are with those. The good thing is the only thing at this point in time is the Galena renovation is still wrapping up. But all other prior projects have now been 100% closed out. So at this point in time, we're looking forward to the Kent County High School project starting this summer. But that is the conclusion of our fiscal year 23 capital improvement plan. So if anybody has any questions.
When do you expect to hear from the state on if they've approved the money for the roof?
So they typically don't officially approve the funding until next spring. However, they will give us indications, hopefully as soon as November or December, basically of what their intentions are. So we'll have a very good idea by early December on if we're going to achieve that funding or not.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to commend Mr. Kirby for his work on the CIP. He's really taken this and has really come a long way with regard to his ability to complete this project, and he deserves a lot of kudos.
Yeah, and the hard work shows, I mean, in the actual CIP final submission document, I mean, it's very detailed, it's very thorough.
Thank you.
You know, and I think as we look at this project and other projects coming down the line, it's just really appreciated that you're that thorough with it, because if there's any loopholes or open holes, they'll find it. And it's just, you're not giving them the opportunity. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any further questions on the CIP?
I see one thing. In the comments on the roof, I see there is an option for photos there. Just curious, maybe why do we not have any photos of the roof, just to see the condition?
We have some photos. They're not an absolute requirement to put in the submission. Now, by early November, we will have to submit to them what are called construction documents, which is essentially current condition of the roof, what the future roof is going to look like. So they will receive pictures of the current condition of the roof. They're just not in this specific application, basically. But they will have, the current condition pictures.
Thank you.
Okay. This is an action item. The administration is recommending approval of the 2023 through 2028 capital improvement plan. Boy, that's a hard word tonight. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the 2023 to 2028 capital improvement plan.
Mr. Johnson has the motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments or questions? Discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, and Wendy's not here. So the motion passes as presented. Thank you, Mr. Kerr. I really appreciate it. Okay, the next portion of the administrative services is the central office device replacement, Apple.
Good evening, President Getz, members of the board, Dr. Couch. So one of the things that you've heard Lisa and I talk about in the last work session is moving everything technology-wise into a rolling replacement cycle. One of the things that we've found is we clearly obviously focus on students and teachers, but because of that, a lot of our funding gets eaten up, and then we put off replacing devices at the central office. With that being the case, we have found some devices here which were purchased in 2010 and are still being used on a daily basis, so we think it's time to probably change that. So we completed our teacher upgrade process last year, and our students were the year before, and these are 4-year cycles, so we would like to do the Board of Ed this year. With that being said, at the Board of Ed, there is some sort of standardization we would like to introduce. There are PC users, primarily in finance and technology, and then the rest are usually an Apple shop. So with that being said, we have broken this up into 2 different quotes. Apple, we can only get the loan through Apple, whereas the PCs, we have several options, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So we would like to recommend approval of the quote and lease agreement provided by Apple to replace central office staff devices for an annual payment of $5,842.74.
This is an action item. Any comments before we go into the motion? Questions?
So I'm confused. The total amount is 22,000,
Yes.
and we're just going to be paying 5,000 for the next 4 years.
Right, and what we hope that does, I know it seems odd because it's such a small amount, but that forces us to keep on that rolling upgrade cycle and not push this off to 10, 11 years down the road.
Okay.
2045.
Right.
When would we make the purchase?
If we had approval, we'd make the purchase tomorrow.
Okay, and we have the money? I know it's minimal, but.
Yeah, it's actually, it's already in our budget. Typically what we do is we just find these large lump sums whenever we need them, which leads sometimes to panic, where if you have to buy teacher devices and central office devices in a year, you're kind of, you have to figure out which one to do. Obviously, teachers and students win out. So this would just help prevent that.
Okay, the administration is recommending approval of the quote and lease agreement provided by Apple Inc. to replace central office staff devices in the amount of $22,828 for an annual payment of $5,842.74. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the quote and lease agreement provided by Apple Incorporated to replace the central office staff devices in the amount of $22,828 or an annual payment of $5,842.74.
Mr. Johnson has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. McGee. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, and Dr. Costa is still out of the room. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is the central office device replacement PC.
So for this one, obviously this is for the PC side of things. We were able to shop this one around a bit. So we did get several quotes from different vendors, and we selected the vendor with the lowest amount. This one does include not only central office staff, but also increasing the number of student workstations in the engineering lab at the high school. We did increase class sizes, and there weren't enough stations available, so we wanted to make sure we had that covered. So we recommend approval of the quote and lease agreement provided by CDW to replace central office staff devices in the amount of $23,750.33, or an annual payment of $6,227.80.
This is an action item. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the quote and lease agreement provided by CDW to replace central office staff devices in the amount of $23,750.33, or an annual payment of $6,227.80.
Mr. Johnson has the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments or questions?
I just have a question. I saw the caveat at the other motion about the $1 purchase option. How often does that happen?
Actually, quite frequently. Since I've been here, every lease agreement that we've had has a $1 purchase option. That's usually pretty standard, and we actually take them up on that.
It sounds to me like quite a deal.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's absolutely a deal. Yes. And typically, then what you can do, if your equipment is not that old, you can resell it and usually recoup obviously much more than $1 for it.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Poor.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. The next item on the agenda is public participation. Ms. Manley, do you have anything for us? Okay. The next meeting of the Board of Education for Kent County Public Schools will be our work session on October 25th at 5:30 p.m. The following meeting will be the next monthly meeting of the Board of Education of Kent County. Will be held on Monday, November 8th, 2021, beginning at 5:30 p.m. with the open session. Open session will be immediately followed by the board members going into closed session. The open session will resume at 6:30 p.m. Before I continue, the work session will also have a closed?
Yes.
Okay, so we will also have a closed session at 5:30 p.m., open at 5:30, going into closed session, back into open session at 6:30 p.m. For both meetings, the work session and the monthly meeting will be located at the administrative building in the boardroom, this room at 5608 Boundary Avenue, Rock Hall, Maryland, 21661. The last item on the agenda is the administration is recommending approval to adjourn this meeting. Do we have a motion to do so?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. McGee. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.